just wanted to say a few words ahead of this video because these videos come off the back of a huge lot of Eaglemoss Star Trek ships that I picked up recently. And so I've put up all the duplicates on eBay for you to have a look at, and I'll include links around and about the place. So if you've got any sort of interest in getting hold of a few of these to have a look at them for yourself, you can do so for a while at least, because it looks like they're not going to go flying off the shelves. I've tried to price them quite reasonably, so do please go and have a look. And without further ado, I will get on with the main video. Cheers. So this is a funny little ship that we only actually see in one episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, the USS Pasteur, NCC-58925, Olympic class. And it reminds me a little bit of, I think it's the Daedalus class. And that's one of those ships that I have a model of, but I can't recall if it ever actually turned up in the original series on screen as such. But it is a sort of a known class, I think, canonically. And it, like the Pasteur, has a very spherical primary hull, which is not normal for Starfleet ships, even of this era. But of course, this is from an alternate timeline because it appears in All Good Things. So it's a medical ship, and interestingly, until I'd sort of looked at this magazine in detail, I hadn't appreciated that it's got this symbol, which is the sort of the classic Earth medical symbol, pretty much all over it, to indicate that it is a medical ship and therefore should be accorded the status of a Red Cross kind of vehicle in effect. So warp nacelles are fairly traditional, but the actual design is quite unique in terms of Federation starships, and of course because it's a medical ship, all it's got is phasers. That's it. But because it's All Good Things, it also goes at warp 13, which, as you'll appreciate if you've ever watched much of Star Trek, warp 10 is generally considered a hard maximum which you can't actually hit either. But periodically, the way in which warp is measured is changed. So you can immediately tell that we're kind of in the future, because warp 9.99999 is no longer the upper limit. Warp 13 is now reachable. So the warp scale has clearly had some sort of recalibration over time. And this ship was, as it says there, unfortunately destroyed in 2395. So it's very, very late 24th century. Because this is from a future in which Picard is aged, and he was married, at one point at least, to one Beverly Picard. So that in and of itself is quite interesting, and it's interesting in the light of obviously Star Trek Picard these days. But she understandably is commanding a medical ship. And we've seen her in the captain's chair before in the last season of Next Generation, because as this magazine notes later on, the female characters were given a more commanding, literally, presence in the series during the last season to sort of, ramp things up a little bit on that front, which wasn't good. But unfortunately, the poor Pasteur here has to venture into Klingon space to go and investigate an anomaly that retired Admiral Picard wants them to go and look at. And that puts them firmly in Klingon space, and two, at the time, futuristic Naegvar attack cruisers decloak and start hammering this poor little hospital ship, and they take its shields down by half in their first volley. So it's absolutely gotten zero chance, and it's lost its warp engines immediately. Command crew are getting killed off on the bridge, courtesy of those pesky exploding consoles that they still haven't fixed in the late 24th century. But ultimately, although the Pasteur does suffer a warp core breach because even Geordi at Engineering Console can't fix it, the Enterprise D, a refitted Enterprise D with a walk-off huge phaser cannon on the underside of its saucer, decloaks and charges to rescue just at the last minute. So it buys them just enough time to get across to the Enterprise D after it's finished off the Klingons. So had it not arrived when it did, it would have been the end of the Pasteur pretty prematurely, basically. It's got a deflector strip rather than a deflector dish. So that again was a slight change to normal. It's the I'm going to get this wrong, caduceus symbol is the medical symbol that's all about the place. So it's interesting that there'd be a sort of dedicated medical ship, and I guess it's like a sort of birth class only. It's kind of dedicated to science, to medical duties. Makes sense. So then there's a general sort of reminisce here about the final season of Next Gen, which apparently interestingly they started it early because they knew they wanted to do the Generations film straight afterwards, so everyone was actually quite tired going into it. That's a young Kirsten Dunst, which is brilliant. Michelle Forbes came back. This lady played Lieutenant Savick in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, Robin Curtis. So I had no idea that she'd come back. And Lower Decks, of course. Lower Decks was in season 7, which of course now has its own animated show. Nothing to do with the Enterprise, but this lady gets name-checked quite a lot in Lower Decks. So, it's nice to see that in there, because it was a standout episode simply because it had very little focus on the normal characters, which was quite clever of them at the time, I think. Relatively unusual. So, of course, in All Good Things, we have Q coming back, sort of the older Picard, and also the younger Picard, with Denise Crosby coming back as Tasha Yar. So, it was really cleverly done, and I have very fond memories of All Good Things, because I watched it at university with like-minded people. And there was an almighty cheer when the Enterprise D decloaked and started kicking on bottom. it was fun. It was fun times. It was sad as well, of course, because it was finishing. But it was they'd had a superb run, so fair dues to them. There's some more there on the actual sort of concept model and the sketches and so on. It was still a physical model. They hadn't switched over to CGI completely, so it was a physical model at that point. And that's that, yeah. So the one and only appearances in Next Generation All Good Things. Apparently this model has been used in DS9. So, interesting. It was a Hope class vessel apparently, but then it was changed at the last minute. Okay. Interesting. So, let's have a look at the model then. And again, this is one of those models where I probably wouldn't have picked it up particularly as a key model, simply because it's only a sort of a one episode kind of ship. So I wouldn't generally indulge in that sort of thing. But as this was part of my overarching job lot, I did smile when I saw it in there, because I just thought, yeah, I definitely wouldn't have set out to get you, but I'm quite happy to have you. Because you do play quite an integral part in the last episode of Next Gen, which is nice, Even in the last episode, we were still getting new ship designs. Even then, so fair dues to them. Because not only did we get that, as I mentioned before, we also got the Nagvar. Although they didn't name it the Nagvar at the time, but they used that model to become the Klingon flagship in DS9 in that era, in our era, if you see what I mean. So they sort of brought it forwards or brought it backwards, depending on your point of view, I suppose, temporally speaking. And so that model then became a new standard Klingon model going forwards. And I'm completely guessing as to where this stand goes, but there we are. So as you can see, really, really good detail on it. Windows all over the place on the front there. But it's got the medical symbol, you can see just there on the front. They've reproduced that. It's quite a heavy one, actually. I think it's the secondary hull that's got the metal in it. I think the primary hull is more plasticky. But they've got the sort of the differentiation between the colours there. The USS Pasteur is written there, incredibly tiny, but I'm pretty sure it is in there. Because again, in the magazine, it's in there. So again, this is probably one of those ones where they had a good reference source for it, so they were able to do it quite confidently. I mean, I haven't even got a clue where its phases are or anything like that. So there's no photon torpedo tubes because there aren't supposed to be, which makes perfect sense, of course. Because it's a medical ship, so it's not intended to be able to fight worth a damn, basically. But it's very, very it's a unique sort of design as Federation ships go. It's not entirely sort of commonplace at all. But I say, nice one to display. I like its overall look. And I like the fact they kind of maximised the volume of the ship as well. Because obviously if you're going to take on shed loads of wounded or, people suffering from a plague, which gave them an excuse to go into the Klingon space in the episode, I believe, then, you want maximum bed space, I guess, and this sort of ship would probably give that to you. Short of having short of borrowing a Borg cube, I'm not sure you could do much better, really, in Federation terms. Anyway, so that's it for this one, and I'll try and get some in the bag for over the weekend when I'll be out and about. But that's it for now. Cheers.